In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, good morning, everybody, or hello, everybody. This is episode 22 of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. Andrew and Jerry speak the truth about school shootings. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers.
And, you know, something, we are both obviously deeply concerned by the events that happened in Uvalde, Texas yesterday. And as a result, I don't know, Jerry, I don't think we're going to break up the show, really. I think we're just going to have a conversation because there are other stories that are out there, and we'll probably wind up pulling them in to all of this. But right now, that's the most important story that's going on, this horrific shooting down in Uvalde, Texas. And there are things that trouble me about it. I'm sure there are things that trouble you about it.
Yeah, and this is on the heels of the Buffalo shooting.
Yes.
And there's mass shootings happening in Chicago. Just over the last 24 hours, 10 people have been shot in Baltimore City. Yeah. We heard a story just from 3 days ago, New York City, a man on the subway traveling into Manhattan from Brooklyn to have brunch with his sister, and he is unprovoked and shot and murdered. There is an epidemic of violence and evil happening across the United States, and of course, this horrific school shooting is just the most recent example.
You have folks who do not want to think. I'm going to say, who don't want to think deeply about the issues and who don't want to sort of talk about circumstances. You know, everybody wants to have their hot take and the hottest of the hot takes, and we'll get into some of those in a minute. I know you appreciated something that I'd written to a Stanford law professor yesterday who just had the most horrific hot takes. And obviously there's the question of the politicization issue. I've got questions, Jerry. I mean, listen, we could spend time, and we will spend time, bifurcating, separating out, you know, school shootings and events like this and events like the Buffalo mass shooting from the violence in Baltimore. One of the hot takes that bothered me, it wasn't really a hot take, but one of the takes that bothered me yesterday was Marilyn Mosby, who dared to talk about working to end violence, forgetting that the bulk of the gun violence that occurs in Baltimore, that she has not abated, occurs in a city where guns are already illegal.
I think this conversation about guns misses the point.
100%, Jerry. Yeah. No, without a doubt. But this is my point: is that you know, the Marilyn Mosbys of the world use it as a convenient pretext to you know, the events like this, to go after their situations. I mean, you know, I watched, and I was flipping around between CNN and Fox last night. I couldn't even stomach MSNBC, and you know, CNN kept trotting out, you know, the Fred Gutenbergs of the world, which of course want to use these events to advance their political agenda. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, I get it. You know, Sandy Hook was almost a decade ago. We'll get into what the president had to say in a moment. Sandy Hook was almost a decade ago. We had Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, which if I'm not mistaken, was in 2017, right? So 5 years ago. We've got this Uvalde school shooting, and I'm left trying to figure out. I mean, let's set aside, for instance, the mental issues for this person. Let's set aside, you know, the failures in law enforcement. I don't understand it. I don't think anybody is reporting on this. I don't think anybody's asked the question. I asked this question of a journalist friend that I know. I said, how did this person get into the school? Right. That's the
look.
Or are we getting too far away from it already?
No. I think that there are two conversational foundations. One is, let's talk the truth, speak the truth as to why this is happening. And we'll do that in the show today.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's also the kind of practical intelligence Why was this shooter in the school? And here's the thing, in terms of just the practical intelligence, every school in America should have a single point of entry, number one. Number two, there ought to be some kind of security in place. And number three, there ought to be an armed armed security or police officer on the premises. It's beyond me why these things happen in just in terms of practical intelligence. Let me tell you something. You never see this happen in American yeshiva schools. You want to know why? Because they have armed guards. Their teachers are trained to defend their pupils, because there's a single point of entry, because they're fortified.
Yeah.
Why would we have public schools in this country? Again, it goes to the problem of public schools. We have public schools that are not prepared. Look, the NBA.
Time out for a second, Jerry, because here's the thing that I know, and this is the thing that I don't understand about the Uvalde schools, and I don't know if it's a Texas thing. I'm pretty sure it's not a Texas thing. It may be a rural school district thing. But I know that every school that my kids have gone to, and I'm not saying that we send our kids to schools in impregnable fortresses. Maybe we should. I'm reminded of a school that I used to drive by in Harlem that had no outside facing windows, and it used to disturb me to no end. But you know, the point is that I know that having put two kids through public school, you know, from pre-kindergarten to 12th grade, I know that it has been an impossibility to get into these schools. And you know, granted, I'm looking at two different school systems and two very different school systems. One in a rural farming community in Maryland, you know, where you had to go through security and sign in, and you had to get buzzed in, and the other in a I'm not rural, but a non-suburban, I guess a suburban equivalent public school in Virginia. But it was the same thing. You know, you go in, you have to sign in. You can't just get into the school without being buzzed in. So I don't understand this. Well,
here's how you wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
Our public schools are broken. Not only are they not teaching children how to read and how to write, not only are they not teaching children history and science, but there is no uniformity. There is no agreement in terms of how to establish security. There was an NBA coach yesterday talking about guns and talking about this issue. And he was the same NBA coach who recently also said that we shouldn't have police officers in our schools.
Yeah.
Let's stop arguing over the politics of this. Public schools in this country must have armed guards in the schools.
Yes.
Period. There should be no discussion. And the fact that we have this patchwork of inconsistency goes to the problem. There's a reason why these shooters go to public schools.
Yes. No. And we're gonna. And yes, I agree with that, because they are perceived as soft targets. And this gets into discussions that I used to have on the air with people. Right. You think about Baltimore, and you think about the difficulty there is in an average Maryland citizen from getting a permit to own and carry, or own and have in their business a handgun. And as I said to somebody, you are criminal X, and criminal X looks at liquor store A versus liquor store B to stick up, right? And they know that liquor store A, there's a reasonable expectation that the owner of the store has a firearm on the on the premises, a handgun, shotgun, what have you. They know that liquor store owner B does not have any kind of a firearm in the business. Which one do you think that the criminal is going to go after? And it gets down to the concept, right, of the gun-free zone, right? Gun-free zones become soft targets for these kinds of criminal acts, right? I mean, this is, if you know that there's going to be no opposition there, then you're going to go and do these things. And by the way, in that instance, right, because we know we had this law called the Gun-Free School Zones Act, which incidentally, right, makes it illegal for folks to go on the premises of a school with a gun. So one would think that if we expect the laws to work, right, if you think you can just pass a law and get rid of a problem, right, or we're just going to pass a law making it impossible for an 18-year-old to get their hands on a long gun, if you think that's going to solve the problem, well, okay, we've seen that the Gun-Free School Zones Act doesn't work. So, so we go down this road. If we're going to have this issue of the gun-free school zones, then we have to make it clear that there's got to be some kind of standards. And Jerry's talking about standards in terms of armed sort of police officers or school resource officers or what have you, but some kind of standard and some kind of grant making for public schools so that they can make it more difficult, if not impossible, for anyone who doesn't have business with the school to get inside the school.
Right. But also we have to address the ideologies, the dogma that allow these things to happen. So the NBA coach I was talking about is Steve Kerr.
Yeah.
And Steve Kerr, NBA Warriors head coach, he because of Black Lives Matter, because of the dogma of America as a racist nation, he organized and fought to take police out of the Oakland school system. He didn't do this because the kids would be safer without police. He did it because of the dogma of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
He was virtue signaling. A lot. You want to speak the truth on these shootings? Part of the reason, or one of the reasons these school shootings occur is because politicians and NBA head coaches and celebrities would rather virtue signal than actually make the hard decisions and sometimes controversial, provocative decisions to do what's right to keep our kids safe. You had Rob Reiner, meathead.
Yeah.
Right, Rob Reiner, or is that the father? I forget.
No, that's Rob Reiner.
So Rob Reiner tweeted out yesterday that all Republicans have blood on their hands.
Yes.
And I'm thinking to myself, that must make him feel good.
Yes.
Right. He's virtue signaling. This is about him and his politics. And also Zeke Cohen, who's a council member in Baltimore City, tweeting out yesterday about how he's sick and tired. And there's a Democratic member of Congress from Colorado tweeting out that he's sick and tired of thoughts and prayers. And my response to all of them, whether it's politicians or celebrities or coaches, stop making this about yourself.
Time out for a second, right? I mean, first of all, there are two different things, at least that I can see, that are going on here. Again, to sort of separate these things out. There are the politicians and others who are blaming Republicans, right? The Stanford law professor who said also that, I think she said that Ted Cruz has blood on his hands. Republicans have blood on their hands. Republicans hate their kids. There's tweets like that. And then there are the tweets about being sick and tired. I'm going to tell you something, Jerry. I'm sick and tired too, right? I'm sick and tired of people wanting to use the events like these, who don't want to focus on the real problems, but want to use it to advance their anti-gun agenda, right? And who don't want to focus on making schools more difficult to get into, focusing on the mental health issues, focusing on the failures in law enforcement. At the same time, they're calling to defund the police, right? And you wonder what happens when you make police departments strapped for resources. You wonder why people slip through their cracks. And we're going to get into this because none of these Democrats wants to, and I hate to make it the sort of the left-right divide. None of these Democrats wants to talk about the lockdowns. We spent a lot of time talking about this last week with Phil Kerpen, because the one common denominator between the Buffalo shooter and the shooter down in Uvalde, Texas, is that both of them were, 18-year-olds who had spent a good chunk of their high school years being in lockdown. And nobody's going to want to talk about it. Well, we want to talk more about that in a few minutes. But my point is, I am sick and tired of this, and I'm sick and tired of folks who say, "No, no, no, we can't harden schools or put armed resource officers in schools until we take care of the gun problem." How about, something? Why don't you do it our way for a little while? Let's let us prove our point to you. What's the harm in spending a little bit more money on school safety and security?
Yeah, you make a good point here. But this is the reason why you're forced to make this a left-right, Democratic, Republican issue is because the Democrats have the courage of their conviction. They will use tragedy, crisis to advance their dogma, their political ideology. Republicans don't even offer up a fight or offer up alternatives.
Well,
on every issue.
Jerry, I think Republicans are fighting on this issue.
All right, so I'll challenge you. I know what the Democratic response is. I know that if Democrats could be king for a day, I know exactly what they would do. They would ban long guns.
Yes.
And they would move toward confiscation of handguns.
Yes.
That's what they would do. They would pull a New Zealand or an Australia where they would
Beto O'Rourke said it best. We're coming for your AK-47.
Yeah, they would.
The president yesterday said it last night. He didn't talk about confiscation, but
that's what they would do if they could. But my challenge to you is, what would Republicans do?
The Republican response is what I've been talking about, Jerry. The Republican response has been, we need to make schools safer. We need to put resource officers in schools. It's a whole range of things, from allowing teachers who want to carry firearms to carry firearms, to having armed school resource officers.
What Republican is fighting for that? What Republican? Yeah.
You're talking about Republicans who are creating a hill.
Who's doing it?
Well, Jerry, there are Republicans who are doing this, but it is not. You're right. Insofar as it is not a tier one issue for any particular Republican.
You and I right now could probably name 100 Democrats who would support banning guns and confiscating guns. You and I could not list.
Jerry, hold on.
Wait, let me finish my point.
Okay.
We could not list 100 Republicans who have a singular, this is what we should do solution.
But again, Jerry, I think part of this gets into that once you get in, it's very easy to have a bumper sticker view of the world that the Democrats have, right? Very easy to say this.
But they believe it. They would do it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, but I think Republicans, if they were kings for a day, would do these other things as well. But time out.
So you say these other things. I can't wrap my head around it. If I were, you want Jerry Rogers' solution?
Yeah.
What I would tomorrow, I would end the public school system in America. The public school system in America is a failed experiment, and it doesn't work. We are radicalizing and we are indoctrinating our kids. We're teaching children there's no truth.
Jerry, the problem with and I get that is your single solution to this, but the problem, of course, is that unlike the Democrats, you cannot get Republicans to all agree that we're going to end this public school system tomorrow. I mean,
then guess what will happen? We'll keep on having these horrific events. The public school system in America, again. You want to know why an 18-year-old kid is murdering 21 people? Because he goes to a public school system where he's taught that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. He's taught that America is a no good, rotten, racist place. He's taught that there is no truth, right? It's the reign of relativism. We are creating shooters in the public school system.
And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the issue of relativism and schools teaching the issue of moral decline. I think in the more proximate sense and immediate sense, we're creating shooters by keeping kids locked down and isolated and spun up and paranoid, right? I mean, it gets back to what we were talking about with Phil last week. When you have a system and you've created a situation in which 1/4 of school-age kids are admitting that they've had suicidal thoughts, that is what creates a
I
system of paranoid
I
student.
I agree with you.
But Jerry, I'm not sure, and this is where you and I would disagree. I'm not sure that ending the public school system solves that problem, insofar as I think it shifts
Andrew,
things around a
there
little.
is not a single public school in America today that is teaching truth, that is not radicalizing our kids.
Jerry, I don't know if that's true.
It is true.
I don't
It
know.
absolutely is true.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you right now that there's not a single public school in America.
I could look. You could.
I think there are lots of public schools. I think you are. Listen, hold on for a second. I think you are correct in that generally.
And Andrew,
vast
in
majority
the public school where your daughters go to school, if your daughter wanted to use an alternative pronoun, would she be allowed to do that?
I don't know. Probably.
Yeah, that's a problem.
But Jerry, I understand this. But again, right?
Guess what? In the
Catholic
school where my kids go to school, you can't do that.
And I'm sure, Jerry, that listen, as we're watching the debate over whether or not Nancy Pelosi should be given communion, and you have an archbishop saying she shouldn't receive communion, but you have other priests allowing her to receive communion, right? There are things that are not perfect. Right. And so you can say this. All I'm saying is that I can't argue. Hold on for a second. Yeah. I can't say that that every public school in Utah allows folks to use a non-binary gender pronoun. Right. So my point is that we want schools to have different curricula out there, and we've lost the battle in many ways. I think parents are reacting now, right? What we've seen in Loudoun County is a prime example, and fighting for this. But I getting back to the proximate issue here, which gets into the mental health crisis. Now, listen, Jerry,
Andrew, public schools were shut down while private and faith-based schools were open,
but not all of them. Right. There are many private and faith-based schools that were closed through.
But however, if to make a general statement, again, in Maryland, in New York, in New Jersey, faith-based schools opened, public schools stayed closed.
Earlier, they opened earlier, and you're absolutely correct, right? As we talk about this, as the president gets out there and other Democrats get out there and say, we have this mental health crisis in America. Other countries have a mental health crisis, but they're not seeing the same level of mass shootings we are.
Well, because but see, the problem with that is that other countries don't have 400 million guns in circulation.
Well, that's what they say. But the reality also is that these other nations didn't shut down their schools for so long, and they're not exacerbating this mental health crises. Right.
Listen,
and so
the bottom line is this, and with the bottom line it, if we're teaching young people in public schools that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, if we're teaching them there is no truth, if we're teaching them that America is a horrible, no good place, if we're teaching Hispanics or Asian Americans or Americans of African ancestry or women that they are victims, then we shouldn't be surprised when we have the violence and the homicides and the mass shootings that we have.
But okay, and Jerry, I agree with you that the school shooting problem is one of many that comes from what you've been talking about in terms of
yes,
it is
sure.
What you're talking about is the general collapse of a civil society.
Yeah.
And one of the
and we're there
of the collapse of a civil society is this. The answer, one of the answers can be you dismantle the system. The other solution is to change the system and get back to a system in which we are teaching fundamentals.
I think that we should learn a lesson from our Democratic friends, our progressive friends. Progressives have been, especially since Obama, they have been very clear about wanting to transform America.
Yes, Jerry.
Republicans and conservatives have to understand that we need to transform the school system.
Here's my problem, right? As we talk about this, right? So we have what is it? It's 100 million kids, 120 million kids that need to be taught, right? 120 million kids in schools at any particular point in time. I think that's the number. So you're talking about shifting all of that, and now I'm sort of noodling this through with you on the air. Let's assume for a moment that you, as Jerry Rogers, king for a day, you wave your wand, and public schools are closed, and
Well, I wouldn't.
everybody.
I'm sorry. I wouldn't close public schools. What I would do is this: I would dismantle the public school system. I would make a distinction between government schools and public schools, and I would allow children, parents in any jurisdiction to choose any school they want, a government school or what we call today as private schools. But private schools serve the public, and if their children, and then I would allow for universal choice. And I would allow tax dollars to be to follow the child.
But here's my point, and I agree with you there. But the point is, so you have this demand side, right? You have the demand side of the equation, and then you have to have a supply of educational providers to meet it, right? Governments, right? Sorry, this is the demand. This is the supply side. So whether it's government schools or private schools or what have you, the point is, you are going to have leftist parents who are going to send their kids to leftist schools.
Let them.
And you're going to have other parents who are going to, say, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to send my kids to leftist schools. The problem becomes, right, it's just sort of shifting the demand side of the equation and the outcome side of the equation. And so you're not really solving the problem, except, it maybe incrementally. What you have to do is, for these government-run schools, you have to change the curriculum. And you have to change who the teachers are. And the only way you can do that is by folks getting involved. And as I said, we're starting to see that up in places like Loudoun County. I just, I agree with you. Something has to change. That we are at a point right now where we cannot solve the problems that face us all because we don't have a common language with which to solve them.
Well, the thing is that, again, the left has a broad solution, and that is guns are the problem.
No, I get it, Jerry. But
wait, let me finish.
Yeah.
But the right doesn't have a response to that.
As I said, they do.
They don't.
No, they do.
What is it?
It's just,
what is it?
We just talked about this. Hold on.
No, but here.
No, time out. We're moving away. We're moving away.
No,
from this.
but Andrew, you're actually making my point. I can say in one word, the left believes that the problem is guns.
Yes.
And the right believes what?
And the right believes the problem is that we are not protecting our kids. We need to protect our kids better. Right? That's the difference. But my point, Jerry, is,
well, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's not the message from the right. We need to protect our kids better.
Yes, I think that's been the message from the right. The message from the right is we need to protect our kids better. We need to have armed school resource officers. We need to allow teachers who want to carry firearms to carry firearms.
See, I would argue that again, you need those things, but that's a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. What we need, look, Jerry, what we need.
I understand. Time out for a second, because you're
trying to be political here.
No, I'm not trying.
I think the name of the show is Speak the Truth.
Just the opposite, Jerry. I'm not trying to be political. I'm trying to get at the root of the problems as they occur. You were talking about a very general solution to a whole set of problems, but I am focusing specifically on A, the Second Amendment problem, and B, the issue of school safety.
See, but in doing so, you're making my point. Our side is all caught up with words and with.
No, I think our side is all caught up in details and actually wanting to focus on what really solves problems.
My point is, it doesn't work. It's never worked. Our side is trying to be nuanced and thoughtful, and let's think, and it's not working. And at some point, we have to just say.
But the problem, of course, is that if we get as general and overreaching as the Democrats are, right? If we try to blow up a system, it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just creates more problems.
See, I get that point, but I disagree with you. I think if Republicans, conservatives, people of faith broadly decided that the current public school system in every state has failed, and that there needs to be an alternative, i.e., there needs to be broad educational choice in every state, I think that would be a first step in dealing with the epidemic of violence. I don't think it's the only step, but the thing is, we can't even agree on that.
Well,
See, the other side agrees.
Okay, but
Guns are the
but
problem.
that's the point, and this is the point that I that was a point that I made very early on in this discussion, and why it doesn't work, because we don't all agree on this,
And that's why we're losing.
well, okay,
We
but
don't have the
well,
courage
okay,
of our convictions.
no, it's not a question of the courage of convictions. You have the courage of your convictions on this.
No, I don't.
I
Not really. I mean, let's see if I go on the radio on Sunday morning, right?
Okay.
Corporate media, and let's see if I have the courage to speak the
Jerry,
truth.
my point is,
I don't know.
we've talked about the issues of political movements being monolithic, and whether or not political movements are monolithic, and that because the right has always been more about a diversity of ideas, and I know you think that that's wrong, but the
No,
reality
I like the idea.
I know you
Diversity.
like the, okay,
Yeah.
diversity of ideas.
Yeah.
So if we are a movement that is centered on the concept of diversity of ideas, it makes it difficult for us to march lockstep behind something.
Let me give you this.
But
let me
hold on. We've
Yeah.
talked about this before in terms of the uselessness of our small L libertarian movement friends, right?
Yeah.
And it's the idea of part of the problem is up on the hill. It's you get a bunch of these rugged individualist types, and it's like herding cats. Or the adage of, if you ask 5 libertarians what the definition of libertarianism is, you're going to get 6 solutions.
Sure.
And it's going to wind up with them all yelling at each other.
Let me give you this analogy, and I think this is God's church is diverse. It's big. There are Catholics, Episcopalians, Anglicans. There are Methodists. I love the line from 42. Branch Ricky's character says, why Jackie? Jackie's a Methodist. I'm a Methodist. God's a Methodist. And so the church is very diverse in terms of theology. However, there are basic tenets of faith that you must believe to call yourself a Christian. You can't break away. We could disagree. Catholics believe in the transubstantiation, i.e., that the host is perpetually the body of Christ. You have other Protestant denominations that believe in the real presence for the moment. You have other Protestant denominations that believe it's just symbolic, but it doesn't make a difference. That's not a tenet of faith. The faith is that we believe that Jesus is your Lord and Savior. You can't not believe that. So my point is, conservatives do not have tenets of faith any longer. And that's why we're losing our political battles, because the other side is better funded, better organized, better prepared.
Okay. I think if you ask 100 conservatives about school choice, I would say better than 98% of them, 98 of those people would say that they support school choice in the way that you envision it.
Well, I get your point, but
the
problem with that is most politicians, and in fact, I will exaggerate to make this point.
Yeah.
Every politician that I've ever worked for or I'm acquainted with, they support public schools. Larry Hogan will brag that there's been more funding to the public school system during his administration than any previous one. You have conservative Republicans.
Sorry, go ahead.
You have conservative Republicans bragging about their support for public schools. I think it's time to say that public schools have failed.
Okay, but see, here's the thing, right? Again, sort of getting into this. If you believe in school choice, right, you're talking about words. So, you believe that there is a difference between public schools and government schools.
Yes.
In fact, I would ask you, so you believe that government schools have failed, not really public schools.
Yeah, because all schools are public.
Okay. So the point is that in the end, right, part of school choice, what's bound up in school choice is the idea that there are going to be these government-run schools. So again,
but many of them will wither and die.
Well, sure. Okay, we can get into that, but certainly there would have to be change, and right, it would be more of a meritocracy based issue in terms of who is consumer.
Yes.
And then we get into a whole other political side of things, but set that aside for a minute. So the point is, even now as we're talking about this, right, we are coming up of that it is much more complicated than merely saying the public schools have failed. Yes.
Let me make this point to you, and I think this is the why we do Andrew and Jerry Save the World.
Which we maybe should change it to Andrew and Jerry Speak the Truth, but go ahead.
But
we may have missed something.
I'm sure that there is not a single talk show today. I'm sure that there is no cable news program today, no podcast today, talking about the public school system as a reason, a cause behind these school shootings. It's what the conversation, and you and I, is a little tense. We don't exactly agree, but the fact of the matter is we're having the conversation, and the broader conversation is missing. I've said on WBAL myriad times, and I've gotten in trouble for it too, that I'm too broad. My position is that parents should immediately withdraw their children from public schools. Let me tell you just real quick. Public schools are, in a sense, religious schools. They are teaching a woke religion about race, about sexuality, about identity politics, about environmentalism. Yeah. Andrew, let me just roll this off real quick. Think about what our children are learning in public schools today. They're learning, again, the whole identity politics, critical race theory. They're learning queer theory and all kinds of alternative sexuality theories. They're taught that America is a racist nation. They're taught that environmentalism, that global climate change is going to destroy them, destroy the planet. They are fed fears and lies and relativism on a daily basis, an hourly basis. And then again, we're shocked that a man on the New York City subway system will walk up to an innocent bystander and shoot him in the chest.
But more to the point, Jerry, right? You know, we wonder why our kids are so stressed and angry, right? We wonder about this.
Right.
And then you add into this the issue of lockdowns and keeping kids isolated.
Yeah.
And then you get into the issues of self-radicalization. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. I got into a conversation with somebody yesterday. Actually, I won't go down that road. But was reminded, have you caught any of Bill Maher's show from last week?
Well, I saw that he talked about how transgenderism is contagion.
Yes. Well, yeah. And to sum it up,
do we have that clip? That's an interesting clip.
I'll pull it up. I need to see if it was segmented out, because it was like an 8-minute long rant.
But what Andrew's talking about here is that in places like LA, we're seeing a great increase in those who identify as transgender or homosexual or gay or queer, whatever term we're using. And if this is true, then why isn't it happening in places like Ohio?
Yes, that's exactly what he said.
And the point is that that this is a complicated issue that deserves a coherent debate without one side being labeled as, well, you hate queer people if you think A. And again, we've talked about this, that the idea of sexuality is complicated. Yeah. And to just say it's this or that is to oversimplify, and we're putting young people in danger. Let
me play this clip, Jerry.
Sure.
And finally, new rule: if something about the human race is changing at a previously unprecedented rate, we have to at least discuss it. Broken down over time, the LGBT population of America seems to be roughly doubling every generation. According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z. Which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054.
So, and he goes on from there. And then he goes, I mean, I can play that if you want, but he talks.
Anecdotal, fill in what he says, but let me just say this real quick. Eric and I just talked to a mom recently, and she has a fifth grader in a school, and her fifth grader came home, fifth grade girl, and her fifth grader said that, "Mommy, what is bisexual? Like, what does that mean exactly?"
Yeah.
And the mother said, "Well, sit down, let's have this conversation," and explained what it is. It's when someone is attracted to both the opposite sex and the same sex, and that sort of thing. But you're in fifth grade, and these kind of intimate relationships are years into the future. Why are you asking this now? Because her entire friend group, apparently she has a friend group of about 10 girls.
Yeah.
Not all of them, except for this one girl who didn't know what bisexuality is, all of them identify as bisexual.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mark gets into this because he talks about the fact that kids are stupid, they don't know what they want, and some of them are doing things to be trendy. And it's cool. It's the cool thing to do. I had a conversation with somebody about kids in their high school friend group. Sort of wrap my head around it. And one kid had come out as a lesbian, which again is fine, right? I mean, this is not a condemnation of sexuality here.
No, but I'm not sure if it's fine. How old is the child?
But well, now she's I think she's either 19 or 20.
All right, well, that's different.
Okay, yeah.
But a 13-year-old coming out.
No, let me stipulate for the moment that all of these kids are above the age of 18.
All right.
There was a guy when they were in high school who had a thing for this girl who was a lesbian or genderqueer or whatever the hell it was. The guy goes off to college and he comes out as trans, and guess what? He's now dating the lesbian. And I don't understand this. And I'm not saying this to make a joke. Right. I mean, I'm wrapping my head around this. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me say this, and this is important because I don't have to defend myself, but I will here. I believe in a free society that people should organize their lives the way they want. Yes. If somebody is trans, if somebody is gay, if someone is queer, questioning, whatever, they should be able to live their life in dignity. There should be no discrimination. There should be no hardship. There should be no violence, certainly. But the problem is that we've gone from this idea of dignity and tolerance, and we have turned it into promotion and celebration. And what I mean by that is this. My computer's
no, you're fine. I can hear you.
The problem is that we believe wrongly that the church is prejudiced because the church has its founding 2,000 years ago, and homosexuality and same-sex attraction was not accepted. I want to clear something up. Number one, the term homosexuality didn't come into the English language until the 1860s. No. Prior to that, it was just same-sex attraction, and it was ubiquitous. And going back to the time of Israel, the time of the Gospels, same-sex attraction, same-sex relationships were completely normal and accepted by culture. The Roman Empire, if you were a citizen and you went to a home, you would be asked, "Hey, can I give you a boy, a girl, a woman, a man? What's your preference?" This idea of same-sex attraction and intimacy was widely accepted. It was Judaism and later Christianity that disrupted that acceptance and said, "Well, this is man's natural state in terms of pleasure, seeking self-fulfillment." Yeah. But God's plan for us is different. God's plan is better, and He said, "No, what I want from you is one man, one woman for life." That's called marriage. In fact, marriage, the one man, one woman for life model of marriage, is so important to God, the Creator, that the entire Bible is an allegory of a marriage. Yeah. The entire, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. My point in saying this is that same-sex attraction is part of human nature. and has always been part of human nature. Those of us who think that God has something better and that you were created for something different, we could believe two things at once. I could believe that transgenderism or homosexual relationships are sinful. At the same time, believe that in a free society, people should organize themselves the way they want. You see what I mean?
No,
And
listen again, and in terms of what we're talking about in terms of biblical law and choice and free will, this is how I was described to me 35 years ago. If you're Jewish, right, and the prohibitions on eating pork, God doesn't want you to hate pork, right? God wants you to crave pork, right? He wants you to crave bacon. He wants someone to serve a plate of bacon and a side of sausage to you, and he wants you to make the affirmative choice not to eat it.
Yes.
Right? That's what he wants. And obviously, in terms of the way the laws of kashrut and the Levitical law of 5,000 years ago were written, there were safety reasons for this in mind. Now we've solved those things, so God wants you to make that choice. But listen, you sort of getting back to this though. We talk about the collapse of civilization and values, and what it translates into is, right. Well, first we got what we're talking about with Bill Maher, which is the issue of the rise in self-identification and what that has to do.
Well,
with
and my point in that whole
yeah.
rant I just gave, it wasn't really a rant, is that left to ourselves, it is completely reasonable that people would identify as trans or gay or curious, because that's our natural state. And my point is that when you remove the transcendent, when you remove the creator from the public discourse, then you're offering young people no alternative.
Well, okay. But it's also, Jerry, in that, bound up in that curiosity, is that we forget. I mean, we remember in certain instances, right, as we have skewed the age of adolescence upward, and we now, professionals consider adolescence to be the age of 26. But that's where the brain is changing, the brain is forming.
Right.
Kids are going through all kinds of changes throughout their lives as children, and so as Maher gets into it, he says, it used to be that when you ask someone what they want to be, they would talk about their profession. Now it's what their gender is. And the reality is that if we allowed kids, we cemented kids into what they wanted to be when they were 6 or 7, we'd have a world full of cowboys and princesses. And obviously that's not the case. And so you have kids who make decisions, and they go through phases, and some things are under peer pressure and some things are
but what's lacking now is that public schools do not communicate, do not have a policy of transparency. If a 7-year-old identifies as trans, most public schools will not tell the parents.
See, I don't know if it's most public schools, but I certainly know that that's true.
Well, I could name more than a half dozen states where that's true.
No, but Jerry, what I'm saying is that a lot of that has to do with the coastal politics, which is part of what Bill Maher gets into. And so, and what it comes down to is, and the danger in what you're talking about is the only determinant in a child's success. And I want to bring it back to the Uvalde shooter. This is an important point. The only determinant in a child's success in school, in childhood, in life, is the involvement of the parents in that child's life. And so as what Jerry is talking about is, as parents are shut out of the process, which is part and parcel of the huge school board debate right now, if parents are not being informed and they cannot take some kind of ownership role in terms of what their kids are being taught, that kid is doomed to failure. Right? If we have a situation in which parents are simply not involved in their child's growing up, again, that's how you produce the Buffalo shooter. That's how you produce the Uvalde shooter.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, and we have one side, right? One side that wants parents involved in the kids' education, and the other side that is trying to keep parents out. And Jerry, this gets into what we're talking about here. Part of the problem.
Well, that's
hold on, Jerry.
You just articulated exactly the thing I was searching for.
And
This is an area where there's a clear difference.
And part of my problem with what you're saying, and again, I believe in school choice. The problem is that making the Jerry Rogers view manifest is that we don't have parents are not engaged. Now, this works. School choice works for parents who are engaged. But if you have an environment in which the parents are disengaged, or you don't have both parents in the home,
okay, let's again, you raise another good issue here.
Thank you.
And that is there was a we promote promiscuity.
Yes.
We promote divorce. We promote alternative lifestyles and families. The bottom line is that we teach our culture today is, and you see with these politicians who are tweeting out that, self-congratulatory, I support gun bans and I support this, right? It's all about them. It's narcissism. But the same thing is true for parents. There are parents who say, I read this whole story of an editor from the editor of the Atlantic, or at the time was the editor at the Atlantic, and she talked about how she was married, had 2 children. It was a lovely marriage. They were happy, but she was unfulfilled.
Yes,
because she had never lived a single life, and everything she did was for her husband or her children.
Yeah, and
so one day she decided, I'm out.
Yeah,
and she packed her bags and left. And she was applauded for this.
Yes, I remember this.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, no, life is not about you. It's about those around you. And this is part of the problem. We've taken out of our culture this idea of obligation, of loyalty, of honor, of sacrifice.
It gets even more proximate than that, right? Let's narrow the focus here. In the past, you would live your life for God, or you would live your life for your family, or you would live your life for your community. Right now, what we are fundamentally teaching our kids is that they are the stars of their own story.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if you believe yourself to be the star of your own story, well, then yes, you are. I mean, this is like a essential Nietzsche, right? You are the Übermensch in your story.
Yeah.
But we know that doesn't work, right? That's not a life lesson that is fulfilling. And so, living for others is the way. Living for God is the other way to do. Living for Jesus is the other way.
Someone told me today that lives where folks are looking to sex or drugs or celebrity or their profession for fulfillment and still can't find it. God has put in each of us, and this is, I think, evidence of God, right? We talk about C.S. Lewis. I talk about C.S. Lewis a lot. C.S. Lewis had written in Mere Christianity, one of his stories in Mere Christianity, that there is no culture that applauds the person running away from battle.
Yeah.
That there is this universal idea that courage is to be applauded. That's evidence that there's a divine creator who put that into every single person. Whether you're in East Asia or in East LA, people admire courage. So my point is, God put into us this desire to seek out the truth. But however, when we replace truth with celebrity, or truth with sex, or truth with politics, or truth with whatever other dogma, then people live a life of perpetual unhappiness and being unsatisfied.
And let's also talk about the other universal equation in all of this, which is that, which is this idea of living for others, right? And this is not me going down a communist or a communitarian role, because people have individual rights, people have respect for, I'm not going to equivocate here. My point is that, again, whether or not it is Buddhism or Shintoism or Christianity or tribalism and totemic religious views in Africa or wherever, you are living as part of a community. You are living either for your family, or you're living for those around you, or you're living for the creator above. That is, and I agree with you here, Jerry. This is a constant that we seem to be missing. So, and that's just it. Oh, this is where I wanted to go. I saw John Mulaney this past weekend, with our daughter, who's a huge John Mulaney fan.
Yeah, so my girls are too.
Yeah, and
My big girls.
and most of it was talking about rehab. And again, right, what is sort of fundamental in all this is actually, it's really interesting, because if you know anything about comedians, right, by and large, and you and I, Jerry, you and I know we've known some comedians in our time, and we know that in the end, as funny as they are almost all of them, they are miserable people. Right. And they get into comedy because they are trying to fill some hole in their heart. Right.
Although broadly speaking, we're all broken.
Well, no,
in some way.
Broken.
Yeah,
But again, I'm talking about comedians and again, comedians who are seeking validation, and they're seeking to fill that hole by sort of external means. And Mulaney, this John Mulaney tour that he's on is really it's not really a stand-up routine. It's really a one-man show about what led up to rehab and his going to rehab.
Well, that's his style of humor. It's a monologue.
Yes. But he gets done with it. And early on in the show, he had noticed that there was like a 10-year-old girl sitting in the second row. And
by the way, because you told me this already.
Yeah.
No way a 10-year-old should be at a John.
Well, certainly
Mulaney.
not with the opening act, which I just, that was astounding to me. I find that listen, it's like, oh God, who was the comedian, who would, Patton Oswalt too. And Patton Oswalt is the one who talked about this. Patton Oswalt would go and do, shows, and people would expect him to be like the character he played on King of Queens, the UPS delivery guy, or whatever it was, Spence. It wasn't a UPS delivery guy. I never watched King of Queens, even with Patton Oswalt on it. And they would be surprised when he was different. So I'm sure this person had seen John Mulaney elsewhere and was a fan. And anyway, the point is, at the very end of the show, Mulaney looks down at this girl and says, "I have two pieces of advice for you." And I won't get into the second one. The first one is really the most important. He goes, he almost nailed it. And I know you're going to pick up on, Jerry, where he missed. He said to this girl, you have to, you cannot seek happiness through external means, whether it is drugs or people or whatever. You can't use those things to make you happy. He said it comes from within. Now, I don't think that's right. I think, I think would say, Jerry, that, you find happiness by trusting in God, and following the teachings of Jesus. But the point is, even John Mulaney sort of recognized that his attempts to fill this hole in his heart were because he was seeking it in the wrong places, either through comedy and making people laugh and the adoration of millions of people around the world, or through drugs. But it doesn't work that way. And again, coming back to what we've been talking about with this school shooter, we have to recognize that there is something fundamentally broken in what we're teaching our kids. I mean, Jerry, we didn't even get into it with this. We haven't even gone into it with this Uvalde shooter. His social media behavior, which is limited in nature, right? But this guy was on Instagram communicating with some random woman. I don't know why. I mean, I think we're going to find in the end that there was a certain element of, not Mark David Chapman, who was the guy, John Hinckley. There was a certain element of John Hinckleyism to this, that he wasn't trying to impress somebody like Jodie Foster, but he was trying to impress this this woman on Instagram. And that is bound up in all of this, is that we live in an era where kids are being taught that they have to be a Kardashian, they have to become a social media influencer. I can't tell you how many kids I've seen who've gotten I was going to say a bad word, who have messed up their lives in the quest for this social media popularity, and sort of measuring their success in how many clicks they're getting on their Instagram account or Snapchat or TikTok or what have you. I'm sorry, I've bored you here, Jerry.
No. It's fine. You don't keep on going. Look. I think you're right. I think though that the most telling thing about what you just said is that a grown up took a 10-year-old to a John Mulaney concert, and that shows part of the breakdown
Yeah.
of the idea of right and wrong. It is wrong to bring a 10-year-old to that concert. It's absolutely positively wrong. Because of the language, the subjects, what does a 10-year-old need to hear about rehab?
Well,
What is it?
No,
I mean, right?
No, that's absolutely true. I agree with you there. I don't know. You know, it's interesting, man. It was. I mean, again, the opening comedian who was interesting, a guy named Seton Smith. Certainly not an appropriate set for a 10-year-old. Interesting, and you and I have talked about this in terms of some of the political stuff that he was doing. You know, Mulaney was interesting insofar as he didn't really work blue. I mean, apart from talking about the drug use issue, and talking about his intervention, and then Jerry, he did a thing where he read at the very end, right before he gave his advice to this 10-year-old, he did a thing where he read from a GQ interview that he had done 3 days before he went into rehab, 3 days before his intervention. And it was crazy, go nuts. He talked about, Jerry, the right before he went in, like he was late to his own intervention, which was fascinating to me. Late to his own intervention because he decided he needed to get a haircut, and he decided to show up at Saturday Night Live to get his haircut. It was funny, but the point is, it wasn't all that blue.
But still, the topics.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, we moved away from our central thesis.
Well, but actually, I want to say this to you, and again
hold on before you say it, Jerry. But right, you've said this. It's inappropriate to bring a 10-year-old to a John Mulaney show. But then that begs my question of, okay, so the parents who choose to take their 10-year-old to a John Mulaney show, you think these parents are going to make better educational choices for their kids?
Well, I don't accept this, right? This is where competition comes involved. So if there's peer pressure, right? Yes. So if a bunch of parents are taking their kids out of a failed public school into a charter school or a private school where there's a higher level of ethics and learning, then these parents might be dragged upwards.
But they might be, but just by the same token, they might also be dragged into, you know, a competition with other woke families, and they would serve to find the most woke school that's out there. That's part of my concern in all of this, is that, and again, knowing that we have to fundamentally change our curriculum, knowing that we have to fundamentally change parental involvement in the curriculum, at the same time, we have this problem in that I can see this further exacerbating the divide amongst Americans and creating, again, as Bill Maher talked about, where something, I mean, it's already a very different outlook in the Midwest than it is with the coastal elites, which I want to spend some time talking about today. I think that gets worse if, I mean, you know, it's interesting. Time out for a second. As I'm gaming this out in my head, Jerry, I think it gets worse in terms of the general divide, maybe between, you know, California and Washington State, again, the coastal elites, and say Oklahoma. On the other hand, you know, it blunts that a little bit by giving conservative parents more options in places like California and New York. Anyway, it's an idea. And then I get into this whole concept of where do these teachers go? Right? I mean,
actually, let me ask you this. We're seeing now more and more, because of the kerfuffle in Florida with the "Don't Say Gay" so-called bill, and also now, you know, libs of TikTok. Am I saying that right?
Oh, yeah, libs of TikTok
and other kind of social media pages. They are revealing all these teachers who again, this is like the politicians who, when there's a tragedy, like in Texas, this school shooting, they feel the need to promote themselves. Well, these teachers are about promoting themselves,
Yeah.
about promoting their lifestyles and promoting their romantic relationships and all the and what's sick about it is that they're seeking validation from children.
Yes.
And so maybe a great culling of the educational establishment would be a good thing.
No, but Jerry, see, this is my problem, is that I don't see it as a culling, right? The problem, part of the problem is that,
well, if bad public schools closed, bad public school teachers will lose their job.
No, but bad public schools close, bad public teachers will go to other charter schools, private schools that open up that sort of serve the needs, right? Again, if you don't have good, thoughtful people who want to focus on the fundamentals of education going into education.
I get your point, but
Yeah.
see, I don't believe the public school union mantra that we have a shortage of teachers. Number one, I don't believe it at all.
Jerry, I'm not saying we have a shortage of teachers. I'm saying in the same way that you have people of a certain mindset who go and become government bureaucrats, right? You don't have anti-government, and I don't mean that
well,
as
you're right, but
anarchist,
you know what? I know. Okay, it's anecdotal, but I know a handful of women. My sister is one who will not teach in public schools because of what they're forced to teach in terms of the curriculum. So there are a lot of potentially good teachers who won't teach because they can't teach in public schools.
I would want to see the data on that. And,
Yeah.
Listen, as I said, this is why it's important to have the discussions, because these things get very complicated very quickly. The other side doesn't want to talk about the complications.
Also in terms of education, I don't like where pedagogy and this and that. Look, I went to the best high school in New Jersey, Bergen Catholic High School, academically, athleticism, the best school in the state, period, hands down. Might be one of the best schools on the East Coast. And I was in I had math class and history class with 45 kids in it.
Yeah.
So this idea that, well, our teacher student ratio is 1 to 10 is nonsense. It's a made up figure.
But see, my point is in terms of sort of the shifting issue, right? Because then all of a sudden it becomes an issue of, in the same way that we have law schools that are trying to deconservatize law schools, and you have there was another profession I was going to use journalism. Journalism, where journalism schools are now becoming factories about indoctrination and advocacy.
Of course.
And
law schools too.
And that's what I'm saying. Law schools, are about indoctrination and advocacy and getting rid of federal societies and getting rid of any conservative thought there. My then concern is, right, that the battle then shifts. Like, let's say that Jerry Rogers is successful. He becomes king for a day. We dismantle the public school, the government-run school system. We create a system of school choice where it then flows and frankly democratizes the process. Then the battlefront becomes the schools of education, and where teachers are getting indoctrinated there, and you're not admitted unless you are indoctrinated.
Right, but this goes again to the larger question of pushing back in terms of the culture.
Agreed.
And again, we haven't talked about this, but I'm going to throw this bomb. I'm going to throw this bomb at you right now, and that is, I find it curious how the left in particular will lament about these school shootings in one tweet, and then the very next tweet sing and praise and promote their abortion position.
Well, listen, right?
We've had 63 million abortions in this country. We have this year will be close to 700,000 abortions. The leading cause of death in America over the past 49 years has been abortion. It's not cancer, it's not heart disease, it's abortion. And yet we teach young people that if you have an inconvenient pregnancy, throw away the pregnancy. What's her name from Fleetwood Mac? And I love Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks just said recently, in light of the Roe v. Wade leak, she said that she had an abortion, and if she didn't have her abortion, there wouldn't have been a Fleetwood Mac. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, has she put herself on such a pedestal that the world needed an extra 2 Fleetwood Mac discs as opposed to the life of her child? This is We are, again, I say this all the time. We are progressively advancing backwards. We are advancing backwards to Aztec infant sacrifice. You know, right? You would sacrifice children so you'd have good crops. You would sacrifice children so you would have success in war. We're doing the same today. We're sacrificing children through abortion so we can have careers, so we can have an extra degree, etc., for our own happiness.
Well, no, and listen, and I would contrast this with one of my favorites, Joni Mitchell, right? And I don't know if Joni Mitchell's had an abortion, but I do know that Joni had a baby and put the baby up for adoption. And I do know that, and she had all kinds of reasons. Joni Mitchell had all kinds of thoughts about pursuing a career and getting locked into loveless marriages like her mother and grandmother. And so she gave the baby up for adoption. But right, if you know anything about Joni Mitchell, you know that she then pursued a life where she was trying to fill that void in her heart by not, she gave the baby up for adoption, not having that child with her, that she, did drugs and pursued meaningless relationships with men and never let anybody get close to her. And then you get songs like Little Green, which is about this child that she doesn't know. Anyway, just in terms of the contrast here, there was another point I was going to make about this. You're talking about Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac. What was the other point you were making, Jerry?
Is that we have this throwaway culture.
The disposable society.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. And
go ahead.
No, and also I'll throw another one at you, which I think is interesting, and that is, and it's controversial, but I'll say it anyway. Pornography. Pornography is ubiquitous. You cannot, right? You can go anywhere, and I have my phone here. You can go anywhere and get the most graphic, pornographic scene on your device. Which again, I'm not a prude. I love sex. I think sex is great. Okay. I like. I'm just.
Now I'm disturbed, Jerry.
But my point is that
I wasn't aware, by the way, you get pornography on your phone. So now I've got to.
Oh, really?
For a second.
So my point is that we've taken sex and we have turned it into objectifying and dehumanizing.
But Jerry, it's not just
again throwaway culture.
But it's the throwaway culture. But it's also again tied back into the narcissism issue and the self gratification. It's all about self. The point that I was going to make though is also because you were talking about this, and all of the folks who were talking about Roe v. Wade and talking about the issues of rights. And I was struck by the contrast here, because of course the other nasty hot take yesterday was that Republicans only care about babies when they're in the womb and they don't care about babies once they come out, which is a garbage take. As I said,
it's not true.
It's not true. But then we have to talk about the consistency here in terms of the rights that we have and the rights that are guaranteed, and stare decisis in the court, right? The Supreme Court has decided that the right to own a handgun is an individual right. Right.
Yeah.
And that is established law through both the Heller decision and the McDonald decision. And so what do these folks want to do? They are advocating upending the law.
Yeah.
Right. Because
it suits them.
Yes, because it suits them. It happens to suit them. Now, I can articulate an argument which is entirely consistent between the issue of life and rights and the right to defend oneself. In fact, I will say this. I will say it right now. Right. The right to life, the right to the life of the child is the same as the right to self-defense. Nobody has the right to initiate force against anyone else. Initiate force. Very, very
Andrew,
very
you just made a brilliant point.
Thank you.
And I was talking to a young person about this the other day about, well, with abortion, you have the rights of the mother, her body, the rights of the child, and her body. And I said, well, look, I said, in terms of our jurisprudence, the weaker party is the one that the state will step in and protect.
Party that is more aggrieved.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I said, look, a woman who is pregnant will have to go through hardships, right? Labor, body changes, all kinds of.
She can't do a first album with Fleetwood Mac.
Right. There's all kinds of potential hardships, but they're temporary in most cases, and life continues. But with the abortion, what you're doing is that you're stealing, robbing from that child the fundamental right to life. So here's
Which, by the way, hold up. Which, by the way, makes it all the more ironic that people are talking about mothers are talking about the rights of their children and grandchildren, right? Okay, if you're so worried about the rights of your children and grandchildren, the ultimate ending of those rights is aborting them. But go ahead.
Right. And so therefore, when you deny a whole class of people, right, preborn children, you deny them the fundamental right to life. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, and so we deny a class of humans. We deny them their fundamental right to life. And then we teach this and we promote it. We celebrate it, right? We shout it out. We have marches and parties. New York City lit up the Empire State Building in I think it was pink color or purple color.
Like, what's the color of abortion?
Whatever it was, I forget but whatever the color is, they lit the Empire State Building to celebrate that they passed a law that would allow for abortion up to the moment of birth. Yeah. My point is that we just don't. The Democrats have moved past safe and rare and legal. It now is celebrated and is promoted. And the question is, what I'm gonna say here is that when you have a culture that celebrates death like this and denies the fundamental right to life, why are we surprised when an 18-year-old goes into a grammar school or an elementary school and kills people? This is what we're teaching him.
And let me add to this here.
We've created this shooter. We've created this shooter because of our culture, and the left won't address it. They want to address guns, and the right thus far hasn't had the courage to address it.
Or more to the point, Jerry, you keep calling it courage. The point is that the right has lots of different answers and doesn't have a way to distill it down into something that's salient. But time out for a second, because I want to offer two things. Number one, on your point about life and the Democrats, I find it really interesting that if the primary is going the way a lot of folks think that they're going to go, Congressman Henry Cuellar down in Texas,
the last pro-life
Democrat it could be out of office, which is astounding to me. And so that should say something. But I want to say something else. I was very excited on the issue of rights. I was very excited about this 2-part documentary about the life of George Carlin. Have you heard about this?
Yes.
All right. So are you a George Carlin fan?
I am. And I also, the review of this documentary, I've posted up at Real Clear Books and Culture.
Oh, okay. How did they like it?
The response has been overwhelming.
Okay.
Positively overwhelming.
I couldn't get through I almost lost it at the first 2 minutes in.
You didn't like it.
And I finally dropped it about 15 minutes in.
Why?
Yeah. Because some of it is new material, recorded of George Carlin before his death. Some of it is other. And George Carlin goes on this extended riff about rights and about rights coming from God and how rights really have no meaning and rights don't exist. The beginning part of this. And I sat there and I'm like, it's like those moments where you yell at people who are podcasting. It really is like you're a ghost. And it was one of these things where if Carlin were alive and he were on Twitter, I would immediately want to go on there and ring him up and say, you are so fundamentally wrong about this. Because he goes on this thing about he said, well, we have these Bill of Rights and there were only 10 of them. And yet as though the Bill of Rights, from the fundamental misunderstanding that the Bill of Rights grants rights, which it fundamentally does not. And then we had to add another 15, 16, 17 amendments to it because the first rights weren't enough, as though the amendments past the first 10 amendments granted rights, which we didn't. It was a change in sort of governmental power. And I know I'm sort of getting off of this, but I was so disappointed in this. Because you expect someone who was such a proponent of free speech to have a better understanding
to get it right.
To get it right. And I'm going to say this just so you all understand. Regardless of whether you believe that rights come from God or rights exist in nature, it starts here. I want you all to imagine for a second that there exists a universe in which there is one person, right? And that one person can do whatever the hell they want, right? They can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. They can act wherever they want. They can, engage in any kind of a behavior they want, right? That person has the right to do anything that they want. And then you put another person in that universe. So there are two people now. Now, each one has the right to do whatever they want, right? Endowed by their creator, naturally endowed. They have those rights merely by existing. It's when those rights come into conflict with each other that we have law. It's one of those things that really bother me about in our conversations with my former friend, Jenna Ellis. She didn't like this example because it didn't augur with her worldview. But to me, it's just tautological. It's self-evident.
Yeah, well, the bottom line about rights, human rights, whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe it's nature, from nature or God, or nature is God. The fact is that as Americans, our system of government is set up so that rights are natural. We have human rights because we're human, not because the state gives those rights to us.
And it comes down to, right, the 9th and 10th Amendment, right? The 9th Amendment says that the enumeration, right? I mean, this is the thing that gets me about George fucking Carlin. Sorry, I apologize, Geraldine.
That's all right. It's a podcast.
George Carlin, and we're speaking the truth here, is that for someone who goes on and talks about the Bill of Rights, it might have helped if he actually read them, right? Because the 9th Amendment makes it really clear. Just because we said that.
Let me say this to you, and it goes back to something that we've talked about before. You see, conservatives like George Carlin, because for years and years, George Carlin spoke about free speech.
Yeah,
spoke about before the word woke was a word, he spoke about woke culture and how ridiculous it was, and we kind of put him on a pedestal. But he was still George Carlin. And another example of how we can't put celebrities on pedestals.
But it gets even dialing it back much, much further, right? There are always going to be people who disappoint you. I have a very good friend in politics who I supported for many, many years. I will not say his name. I supported him when he was doing senior political work. I supported him in runs for office, and he was a good friend. And then Donald Trump got elected, and it broke his brain.
Yeah, well, a lot of our friends. The same as this is true with a lot of our friends.
But my point is, and so he goes and he disappoints. Now, do I regret? I don't particularly. This is the problem that we fall into, right? Because there are people who will say to me, "See, you promoted this guy. You wanted him to be the vice presidential nominee in 2008, and God, imagine if he'd gotten it." And I'm thinking, well, listen, if he'd gotten it and John McCain had won in 2008, things wouldn't have been perfect, right? It wouldn't have been the Donald Trump presidency, but it would have been better than the 8 years of Barack Obama. I think he would have been a better vice president.
Sure, of course.
Than Sarah Palin. But then again, I think Sarah Palin, would have been a great vice president. And I still stick to that, as crazy as she has become. By the way, Jerry, she's on Cameo as well. We could get her to cut an ad for us for the show.
I think this, and we're running late, but I think this. I think that the reason why we see this uptick in violence over the past several decades, it's not just this school shooting this week. Look, you can look.
Here is the bottom line truth.
Yeah, the bottom line is that our culture has pushed the idea of truth out of the public square, and we have in our celebrity, in our gaming, in academia, in our public schools, we have this reign of relativism. That everything begins and ends with you. We see our politicians self-promoting. We see celebrities self-promoting. We live in an age of narcissism and self-regard. There's a line from Gladiator, and I love it. When Maximus, he's revealed who he is, and he tells Caesar. He tells the emperor.
I know where you're going with this.
He says, the time of your honoring yourself will come to an end.
Yes.
And that's the solution. We have to stop honoring ourselves. We have to stop virtue signaling. We have to stop with the woke religiosity and dogma. And those of us who know better need to, and I'll say this at the end of the show, we need to find the truth, plant our feet, and stand firm. No, it's not the end of the show. But there's a reason why I say that is because, again, the left has the courage of their convictions. The right is so discombobulated. We need to agree that abortion throwaway culture is unacceptable and we should push back. Even as hard as that is, we need to agree that sexuality is precious and we have to push back on the culture of pornography. We have to agree that children are better off in a home with a mom and a dad, period. Yes, there are alternative families, but parenthood and families, the last best defense of a free culture is the family.
Yes.
And we have policies and we have agendas in America that is breaking apart the family.
And don't think it's not lost on us that as we talk about this, the culture of self-centeredness, that we're doing this on a podcast called Andrew and Jerry Save the World. So,
well, again, there's a bit of irony there too, right?
I mean,
we don't believe we can actually save the world.
Yes.
But we do believe the world can be saved.
Yes, and the truth ought to be spoken. Hey, before we go, I want to say this much. You got some nice little fan tweet out there the other day, as we were talking about the whether or not Top Gun Maverick is going to be any good, and it's getting great reviews. But then again, so is the George Carlin documentary. Someone tweeted at me that they agree with you, Jerry, that they are nervous about this.
Well, you know what? I didn't read the piece yet, Andrew, but there's a piece I saw. I'll read it later after the show. That Top Gun Maverick is a celebration of Reaganism.
Okay.
Now I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
But my point stands that for Top Gun was a great movie, not because it was a great movie. It was a great movie because it captured the moment. And that's what made it great. And plus, I criticize Tom Cruise all you want. The dude is a movie star. Tom Cruise is one of the last movie stars.
So let me tell you something. Yeah. The trailer for Mission Impossible 7 dropped yesterday. And we watched the trailer. Tom Cruise is now older than John Voight was in the very first Mission Impossible movie. I mean, I want you to let that sink in and think about how Tom Cruise looks and him doing this movie. Listen to me, this is akin to the fact that Paul Rudd is now older than Wilford Brimley was in the first Cocoon movie. And you look at the way Wilford Brimley looked, the way Paul Rudd looked.
I love it. I love it. I mean, it goes to show you that age is relative.
Hey, let me add this to you, Jerry. When was the last time you went and rewatched The Godfather?
The last time I watched it was when whatever streaming service or whatever cable channel had strung the movies together.
Okay, and did the Godfather saga.
Yeah. So how long ago is that? I don't even know.
That I don't know. So I've watched bits and pieces here and there over time. I love that movie. The Godfather is my favorite movie of all time. We're watching The Offer. And I think I talked about this last week on the show.
Yep.
Loving The Offer. It's great. The guy who does the impression of Robert Evans is fantastic. But we decided that we could not send our daughter off to college in the fall, late summer, without having sat down and watched The Godfather with her. And we are watching it in chunks, because you could break it down into discrete chunks. We're watching the first one right now. And there are things that I am catching now that I've never caught before. And some of it has to do with the fact that watching The Offer, there are different things you're looking for. And the sort of the issues of family, again, sort of talking about this, right? Family and alienation and doing things for yourself, right? You have Michael Corleone, who is serving his family. And so, it's worth it if you get a chance to go back and sit. Maybe you do it with your older kids.
I want to ask you a question because I love talking movies with you. I tell you, heavy topics that we cover. It would be nice to do a show on sports, baseball. My kids got me the Paul O'Neill book,
Nice.
9 Innings of What Baseball Taught Me. So I'm looking forward to that.
Probably my second favorite Yankee of all time, Paul O'Neill.
Yeah, I love Paul O'Neill, the Warrior. But I'm going to ask you this question though. I love the
Treasury Secretary.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's a little wonk humor right there.
Right? Tell you. Listen, time out for a second.
Yeah.
This is like my wondering if that Showtime series Ray Donovan was going to be about Reagan's transportation secretary.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's a good show too. But here's my question to you. I love The Godfather. I love 1, I love 2, and I like 3, but for the ending.
Yeah.
I didn't like the ending. I thought it was lazy.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought the ending of Godfather 3 was just lazy. It didn't warrant the great saga. But that being said, there are scenes that I have trouble watching because I know what's going to happen and I really dislike it.
Wait, in 3 or in the other 2?
No, in all 3 movies.
Okay, yeah.
I give you an example of this, not from Godfather, but from the movie Far and Away. Remember Far and Away?
Sure, yes.
All right, so I love that movie, and I know it's cheesy, but I love it anyway. I don't care.
I get it, and I understand.
But there's the scene where he is boxing the Italian champion.
Yes.
And he's concerned about the love of his life, and so he's paying attention to her. Right, he's beating the hell out of the Italian guy, but he sees that his love is being abused. You know, is being.
And by love, you mean Nicole Kidman, not
her character.
Blame it on Rio. Got it. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, so he's so distracted that the Italian guy beats him up and wins the prize fight. I can't watch that scene anymore.
Okay. Because
it just bothers me so much.
Sure. Yes. It seems a little out of place there.
So there are scenes in The Godfather. I'll give you for instance. Where I wish it had gone a different way. When he's in the rowboat with Freddie, Fredo.
Yeah.
It's
not him in the rowboat. It's
right.
in the rowboat with Fredo.
Right. But like that could have gone a different way.
Sure. Yeah, but again, right? I mean, part of the setting.
Would you change parts of The Godfather? Like, would you have written it differently? Parts of it now?
No, I mean, except for 3, which it's funny because I hate the story of 3. I just think.
Well, I like that. I like that he's trying to get legit.
I think there are some aspects of 2. 2 is a great sequel, and probably next to Empire Strikes Back, the greatest sequel ever made.
Yeah.
But there are essences of the story, right? I would have first off. I would have done more to bring in I think it's Richard Castellano as Clemenza, bring him in as the Clemenza character and not go down the road of Frankie Pantangeli.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it has to be this way, right? Because, again, if we're talking about the issues and to bring it back to the theme of the show today, living for oneself and living for the family, this is all about choices that are made. And Fredo chose to live for himself and did not choose to live for the family. And so Fredo,
I guess what bothers me about it, so that scene with Fredo plus the ending is there's zero redemption anywhere in any of the Godfather movies. There's no redemption.
Except, no, I don't know. I mean, Connie comes back into the fold after, I mean, and there should have been a greater emphasis on that, on Connie coming back into the fold. And sort of forgiving Michael. I mean, you're right though, in that in part 3, the better story would have been about Santino's son. Instead of and Santino's natural son instead of Santino's bastard. I don't particularly like what's his name is Joey Zaza. In 3.
He's better in Criminal Minds.
Well, he's also better as the voice of the mobster in the Simpsons too. So that's a problem there. But right, I mean, it's interesting because at some point in time we're going to hear or we're going to see in the offer the debates back and forth between how The Godfather was shot and then how it was edited, because in the early cuts, the rough cuts of The Godfather, Robert Evans, the head of Paramount Studios, was very unhappy with the way the movie was looking, that apparently it sort of missed the forest for the trees. So anyway, as we've spent way too much time talking about this. Here's at least what I come back to here. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have school age kids, hug them close, and talk to them about hug them close, but your most important role as a parent is to make your kids feel safe. And so you gotta take these moments and opportunities to do that.
And I'll say this too. And again, I'm not going to be as not lighthearted, but as kind as you are.
Yeah.
I think there are too many parents who, out of fear of embarrassment, won't speak the truth to their children. Again, I'll give you an example of this. We went to visit Georgetown, and the first thing they showed us in Georgetown was this dorm that was special for transgendered students.
Yeah.
And I have nothing wrong with that. They want to do that. That's their business. But it struck me, it was the first thing they showed us.
And Jerry, this gets into what I'm talking about in terms of my concerns about what you want to do. Georgetown is a Jesuit school, and they're doing this.
Yeah, but you have to separate the university and the wealth. And Georgetown also has pardon my language, but Georgetown has FU money.
Yes.
When you have FU money, you can untether yourself from right and wrong because you do what you want. But let me get back to this point, though.
Get to the point.
So they showed us this this dorm, and again, fine, but they didn't show us their great chapel. They didn't show us their great artistic studio or a science lab. They went right to the transgender. So anyway, we're standing there, and there's all these parents, and we're all like, "Oh, isn't this wonderful? Look, there's a stove, and oh wow, this is." And it wasn't even like a nice dorm. It was just, and we went into this common kitchen area. It wasn't even clean. There was dishes in the sink. My point is they brought us there on purpose. It was to make this kind of virtue signaling. We're not like these other schools. We're enlightened here. And I knew I was offended by it.
Yeah.
And I knew others were. And I said to the person, I said, why would you bring us here first? And the guy who was the student guiding us was, well, it's on the list. I'm like, yeah, but you don't think we'd want to see a science lab or the where the orchestra plays or see a classroom? You bring us to a dirty, filthy kitchen, and because you labeled it the transgender dorm, we're supposed to just applaud you?
Yes.
And my daughter was mortified. But you know what? After the tour, more than one parent came over to me and said, thank you.
Well, listen, and not for nothing, right? But if I'm the parent of a transgendered kid who's looking at Georgetown, I think I would be a little offended that they had such a crappy dorm with a messy kitchen.
Well, the dorm might have been nice, but they did bring us to it.
It sort of gets me into.
My point is, yeah, love our children, love them up, but also tell them the truth. I think even and especially when the truth is difficult to say.
I think maybe we should bring in, we should work on getting Matt Schlapp in the next couple of weeks to come on and talk more about parenting in schools and all that stuff. Yeah. Somebody of that nature. Well, Jerry, listen, and back to it. You've already said it, but say it again.
Find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun, and please, by all means, stay safe.
Yeah.